This is my face when I hear people say that they quit Caro-Kann because it's not good enough of an opening. Yes, I get it. It can be quite intimidating if you are trying to follow what the computer usually recommends. But for today's video, I'm gonna be playing 4 model games against low-rated players, showing you exactly what to do in order to make the Caro-Kann feel the easiest opening of all time. And additionally, if you make it till the very end of this video, I promise you will be at least as handsome as I am. Enjoy! I'm gonna be sticking with our little Caro, and we're gonna be playing the main line. We are not gonna be messing around with any sidelines just yet. When we will reach, let's say, a rating range around maybe 1600, that's when we can perhaps experiment a little bit once you get a little bit more advanced. But for now, just sticking with very basic stuff. Here we have two options: bishop to f5, which is way more theoretical and just requires a lot of knowledge, or my favorite move, c5, which is the so-called Botvinnik-Karls variation. It has a pretty strange name, but at least it is way easier to play. So opponent goes for dc5, which is what they will do around 30% of the times. More often, I would expect them to play something like c3, knight c6, and we get this kind of like blocked structure after cd4, bishop to g4, which is very thematic. Black has pretty easy plan. We have already had this many times. But for now, I recommend you play knight c6. From a theoretical perspective, e6 is actually a little bit better here, just trying to like recapture the pawn. But I think, at least in this rating range, below like 2000, this move is just way too profitable not to play. This is also what I recommend in my chessable course on the Caro. I think it's quite sound, so we'll stick with it. And we are getting a very interesting line. Okay, hello opponent. Glamour Hammer. What is this? Because bishop to b5, it is such a strong move since it's mainly forcing us to block the bishop now. Because notice knight f3 was not played, we would have had the pin. And I believe that after bishop f5, that's simply not going to give us enough play, and white will be able to just keep the pawn without much compensation. So for like low rated games, you could stick with bishop to f5. I don't think you'll necessarily get punished, but I am gonna stick with the best move and play e6, which is essentially just threatening to win the pawn. The line usually goes like bishop d7, knight e7. Well, they will be forced to take. And the kind of interesting part is that we take back with a bishop, since normally their bishop will land onto e3, and we can use this knight f5 move to be like super annoying, with good compensation for the pawn. But when they play a move like bishop takes on c6, voluntarily giving up the bishop pair, I don't think, this should be any good for white. So plays b4. The idea is that he's keeping the pawn, but it kind of gives me a move like a5 to undermine, which is very typical for this structure. Like imagine he goes ba, then he's gonna literally have a pair of double pawns. We can easily recapture both of these guys, and black is better because we have better pawn structure. And after c3, a lot of people get anxiety about the light squared bishop, but I think this is one of the very nice cases where we get to highlight why this can be such a strong piece. You know, it's just kind of like cutting the board in half and pretty much forcing him to play knight e2, as knight f3 would be the desired square. However, he's never able going to castle. Never gonna be able to castle. But after knight e2, here I think we have a very nice idea that most of the people would forget about. I think it's very natural to play queen c7, but even stronger to play a move such as queen b8, which is a double attack, targeting both e5 and b4. Which is a very common trick for this structure, especially after they go for something like bishop takes on c6. Once you recapture, be aware of this idea, double attacking the pawns. That is very crucial. And he just plays bishop to f4, which is an indicator that, okay, we have at least takes and take on b4. Additionally, there could be knight e7, knight g6, targeting both of these pieces. But when you have such an obvious pawn grab, yeah, if you don't see an obvious reason why not to play it, then you kind of have to play it. Hopefully that makes any sense. Okay, queen a4. Now, with queen a4, he's essentially threatening the pawn on c6, saying that, well, you can go bishop takes on e2, but that would be kind of foolish, allowing queen takes on c6 intermediate move, and then the position is pretty awkward. So I think we're just going to throw in the intermediate bishop b5, getting rid of that threat. And after he takes, now we have a choice. There is simple move, queen a7, targeting the pawn, but I'd like even better to just try to stay ultra aggressive. Alright, just keeping pressure on the queen and on the bishop, forcing him to stay on the b file. I mean, not like he has any other squares, but he needs to like keep me pinned. Imagine I get to do something like bishop takes on e2, then this guy remains hanging. But obviously bishop takes on e2 now would leave my queen undefended. So we're in a pretty comfortable position where I can already recapture this pawn and black is fine. I also want to quickly check whether there's anything better, like let's say unpinning, so we can threaten again bishop e2. The biggest problem that I see with unpinning is that it kind of allows him to play knight d4. So bishop takes on c5 is not only like a very natural move, but it's also kind of prophylactic against knight d4, because we can just take it. So I think really already white's position is pretty much completely ruined strategically speaking, because we have very nice assets such as the bishop pair. We do have a better pawn structure. Just look at this single pawn island. Just these guys are going to be massive targets in the future. And yet again, don't be foolish taking the a2 knight, because we still need to solve the issue with the queen. So in order to solve the issue with the queen, I think the simplest is just to get castled, because when you are castling, then the queen is going to be defended by the rook. So yeah, I'm not in any particular rush. I just want to finish these two moves, and then pretty much I think the whole gameplay will be around the a pawn. Okay, like the c pawn is an isolated pawn, could potentially be a target as well, but usually the pawns that are placed on the open files are obviously easier to target because you can bring your rook over. And when he plays a move like bishop e3, that's essentially saying, okay, just let's trade. I'm more than happy to trade. Well, I don't care about the fact that his rook is opening up. I care more about the fact that now he has this doubled isolated pawns, which are huge weaknesses. I think already we can start unpinning by collecting the pawn. Notice this is quite problematic for him. Still need to be careful because bishop e2, queen a4 may be annoying. So I want to yeah, be careful with the rook. I could potentially take with check here and then take the knight if he's not careful. I could also maybe go for an aggressive rook lift. That would be a pretty funny move. Nevertheless, castling should always be good. So he plays knight to d4. Targeting that, I think stick with simple move here. Take with check. And I could take the rook after, but I feel like that's giving him unnecessary counterplay. So I'm just going to get myself castled. In fact, I'm going to play even a nicer move. Rook takes on d4. Look at this beauty. The point with rook takes on d4 is that I may have actually blundered. I thought we take, and then we pick up the rook, but I forgot he has a back rank check. Which honestly, I think might end up being pretty instructive anyways. Like I thought this, but he has check. So I think even better, it's now to play like an exchange sack and castle. Because since we have so many extra pawns, how many pawns do we have? Like we have knight and 2 pawns for the exchange, and we have pretty active pieces, so we can easily start activating in a position like this, and you will see why yeah, having the knight here could be superior. I'm gonna go for a weird move, but the point is to keep all the pawns connected. That is very important little detail. And then the point is to eliminate the b pawn. That is potentially the only likely scenario for us to lose, where yeah, like let's say he takes your c pawn and then tries to queen the b pawn. So once we eliminate that, we should be in pretty decent shape. I'm gonna make a luft, a move like g6, and yeah, just need to make sure we get a knight back into the game. Then that's gonna be totally safe. So I'm gonna start with knight d2. Getting the knight to c4 is a very safe square, because even if he tries to like give up the rook for it, then we will be having a winning endgame. Like a rook endgame with 2 extra pawns, it's completely winning. And what is very important to understand about this kind of structure is that whenever you are having this type of endgames, it helps to have the rook on the board. Like from white's perspective, it would be even better to yeah, trade a pair of rooks, because rook and knight or rook and bishop will have pretty nice coordination in these type of scenarios. And yeah, I'm gonna play h5. His king is almost trapped in like a mating net, so yeah, I have knight e5 defending against everything. And if I manage to play knight g4, he's in a mating net, which is pretty hilarious. So yeah, it's good that there is no way for my opponent to keep piling up pressure on f7. And yeah, rook e1, the problem is that I can go knight g4, but he can no longer take on f7. So yeah, he goes for rook e6, trying to take a pawn, but the problem is that he's getting mated. For the love of Jesus, why are you trying so hard to lose on time? I mean, are you completely nuts? On the other hand, at least you played that endgame kind of okay. But before we move on to the following game, let me show you the key takeaways. So first of all, starting with the opening, when they play this very specific bishop to b5 line, it is super important to admit it and play with a locked bishop after e6. Because if you try it really hard to play something like bishop to f5, white can quickly punish you with a move like knight f3 and then the quick knight to d4 can be super annoying to deal with. So once we move on to the middle game, after he took, played before, critical undermining, you want to be using this a5 move and then put your bishop onto a6. Notice that the bad bishop is now perhaps the best placed piece on the board. And after knight e2, really the biggest eye-opening idea for this specific structure is the move queen to b8, creating a double attack against b4, e5, which most of the times is gonna win you a pawn, or in case white tries to play something like queen to d4, keeping both pawns defended, well, then black has a very easy game after something like knight e7. Imagine knight f5 is a huge threat, and if they try to stop that by playing knight g3, well, congrats, you can just continue development, knight g6, get castle, and yeah, white is gonna be stuck in the center forever. Black could eventually use the f6 break with a much better position. And really the key turning point of the game was at this moment where I kind of panicked. I mean, he kind of panicked and played the move rook takes on d4, forgetting about the little back rank where it is way easier to just get castled, sacrifice the pawn on b5, because then you can literally play anything. Let's say you just decide to double up, play knight f5, black is having an extra pawn, the position is much better. I mean, opponent is struggling to get any of his pieces into the game, so this would have been even an easier conversion. But hey, I hope you guys found this endgame very instructive. Once you keep one pawn island, and the knight is usually stronger than the rook. So with that being said, I think we can move on to the following game. Before we get started, quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is me. I am making this video possible, therefore check out my London System course, which is on a sale for one more day. Right, everybody, managed to get another black game. Gonna be sticking with a Caro-Kann, and let's see, are we gonna be getting another advance? or perhaps something different. Okay, opponent immediately takes the pawn on d5. Just gonna be recapturing, and I am still gonna be sticking with the very mainline stuff that I usually recommend you guys to play. Additionally, if you want something like more goofy, you could play knight c6 followed by fianchetto, and then this knight h6, f6, knight f7. Ideal play for like e5 in the future. But for now, if you're in this rating range that we are playing, I highly advise you to just stick with one simple setup, and that is going to be giving you very easy positions. So bishop f4, yeah, when we are playing the exchange, knights are going onto the natural squares, and important to get the bishop out. Ideally on g4, if that's taken, bishop f5 is also perfectly reasonable. And yeah, just gonna follow my word, listen to my own advice here, and play e6, bishop e7. And okay, we're already getting a very interesting situation on the board because our opponent is playing the move h3. Now h3 is forcing us to make a decision. Should we take on f3 or should we retreat? Well, luckily for you, we have a rule for every variation that white is playing against the Caro. So whether it's e5, knight c3, or takes, there is a thematic way to answer this move. And the rule that I made is saying, well, in the exchange, whenever they have either bishop on b5 or knight on c3, we can meet h3 by takes. We see none of that here, therefore we can draw the conclusion to just slide it back. Let that sink in. Okay, this is really effective because we're not giving him the bishop pair for free. So just e6, bishop e7, castle. Now specifically because there is this bishop onto f4, it's a bit better to go ahead and exchange. So I think I'm gonna stick with that, and if he goes for the pin, then I'm gonna retreat, trying to keep it as simple as we can. So I'm gonna offer a bishop trade. We're more than happy with trades in this structure, and well, now I'll even show you another idea that you can use, bishop g6, because usually this is the only problematic piece. Like that bishop is usually the one that checkmates you. So I'm gonna try to exchange it right away. They are usually afraid to take because it's opening up the rook file, potentially, you know, giving us an attack. But I think the key concept here is not to get caught like daydreaming about an attack, because I don't think there's like a realistic way to get a pawn push. So it's better just to simply castle. But important, you have to watch out for something here, because if you're not careful, he may be able to get knight e5 and then f4. So the point is, whenever he's ready to play knight e5, you're gonna have this queen c7, kind of obscure looking move, but it's a really nice little detail. Sorry for the quick interruption once again, but I think we really need to double down on this concept. So in the game position, the queen c7 concept, it is just so vital because, well, first of all, this is usually the best square for the queen against the exchange, and if you're ignoring such little details and let's say you just carry on with your life and, for instance, castle, the problem is that you are not able to get rid of the knight e5 move immediately, okay, simply because of the fork. And now the problem is that if, let's say, you take the pause, play queen c7 a little bit later, trying to now exchange, if he has to take with the d pawn, this structure is always fine for us. Like we can maneuver the knight around to d7, c5, and so on. But this gives white the timing to play the f4 move. And you're simply too late right now. If you take on e5, he takes with the f pawn, and usually this is just giving them a crashing initiative. You go knight d7, I mean, he gets pressure on the f file, he can bring the knight, he can bring the queen, and so on. So this is way worse, and an easy way to remember this is by, okay, whenever you see the knight potentially landing on e5, you want to be able to get rid of it. Like, imagine you have a little bit of teeth pain. If you go to the dentist the first day, the dentist is gonna be like a very nice guy, cracking jokes, and so on. You deal with the problem immediately. However, let's say if you have the habit of most low-rated players that, okay, they allow opponent to play knight e5 and then they leave the knight there forever. It's like you pretty much go to the dentist after 1 year, which you already know the infection starts spreading. It's no good anymore. Like the dentist looks at you, tells, okay, dude, I mean, I don't know, in order to stop this pain, I may have to chop your head off, and you'll also need to pay me $10,000 in the first part. After I chop your head off, you can send the other 10,000. I mean, at this point, I'm like, dude, I can send the white forward. It's gonna be a little bit easier. So, fact of the matter is, whenever you see an annoying knight in the center like this, most of the times is best to get rid of it immediately. So now with that, I think we can go back into the game. But the point is, after pawn takes, we can just move. And this is totally fine for black. And I am actually quite happy about how this game is developing. I mean, our opponent has played very good moves so far. Just doing a little profile check. So far, nothing strange though, I have to say. And I think here is the position where we castle. Yet again, don't dream about that, just get castled. And I think it's important that you realize, well, about the structure, the main idea is to use these pawns by playing the minority attack. So it's usually something like b5. However, I'm also sort of looking for concrete ideas. Like he may be threatening knight g5, and if he's in time with, let's say, bringing the queen to h4, that's the only kind of dangerous thing that can happen. So for this reason, I am thinking knight e4, not only like stopping knight g5, but also kind of trapping his rook. So he needs to sort of watch out for maybe a move like f6 at some point. So I don't think he was supposed to play knight f3. He played it very quickly, but now the rook on e5 looks kind of, you know, running out of squares. It's like almost gasping for air. And I can still very much play b5 on the next move with the idea to just hit the pawn at the base, play b4 and put pressure on that. It's gonna be very important, like what's happening in the next couple of moves. I am expecting maybe like a knight g5 move from my opponent, where I think we have nothing better than to trade. He goes rook e4, however, I have to take, and now he plays the exchange sacrifice. He goes, okay, knight e2. So this is pretty much just a bit of a desperate reaction by my opponent. Like, he thought his rook is getting trapped, therefore try to, save it. Okay, on knight g5, fair to mention queen f4 would have been strong, targeting the knight and defending the pawn. I think losing for white. And on knight d2, still have same queen f4 idea. Could also defend it with queen c6, but also I see nothing wrong with like defending here. The nice thing is that, well, he has a positional threat of getting the knight to e5, so as long as we avoid that, we should be in good shape. I could also strike with e5 right away, which I think it's a good move, just because, well, already threatening to take, create him a target. After rook d8, pawn is weak. And when he pushes, we get a pretty nice construction in the center. So notice that one potential plan for white is f3. And after you take, pawn on e6 would have been weak. So when you get the pawn on e5 and you have this structure, you pretty much have no weaknesses, which is kind of important to understand. Now I'm going to bring my last piece into the game. I think important to have pressure. And after c4, I can even consider a transformation in the pawn structure with b5, kind of forcing b3. So I think that's pretty nice. He cannot take, because that just makes it straightforward for us. If we win pawn on d5, it's kind of like game over for him. So he needs to take back with a pawn. But then, once he takes back with a pawn, I think we have like a few moves to consider. I would love to play queen c5 and just kind of hang around, block these pawns. However, when I play queen c5, knight b3 is a little bit annoying. Another move could be rook b8, threatening rook b2, activating. And he may still play the same knight b3, but this time a5 is very annoying, because he cannot play a4 as the knight would drop. Yeah, so I think rook b8, rook b2 is a very strong maneuver in this position. Also, he cannot unpin with queen e3, because then, yeah, like, Knight b3, let's say, drops pawn on c4. So I'm gonna stick with the idea that I have already mentioned. He is not in time with c5 because of a4, and I feel like his pawns are dropping. If he goes d6, I think he's just a little bit premature. Like, worst case scenario, after c5, I could even give back the exchange with a move such as rook b3, a b3, and then pick up the pawn on c5, just because it's very likely the pawn on d5 is gonna, collapse as well. So that would be, like, let's say, kind of the emergency button if we feel like his pawns are getting out of control. Intuitively, I kind of assume that c5, a4, his pawns are lost, but maybe after d6 is not very clear. Not super sure if I had to allow this. We can maybe play a move like queen f7 there, stop his queen from checking. And after like knight d2, still it feels like, you know, a move such as rook c8 should have more or less everything under control, like rook c1, queen d5. I mean, he has to play queen c4. Then we have to pretty much take. He has to like take it with a rook. Honestly, that's a bit tricky. It's a bit difficult, but he just plays rook c1, which is a slow move because it just allows us to make his knight passive. And now I can either infiltrate, where he's like quite likely to start pushing, but now I can go queen c5. If you remember, problem with queen c5 was that he had knight b3. But no more knight b3, so this move is great to play. Just making sure pawns are weak. Yes, the queen is not like the best blockading piece of all time, but in this position it might be the best blockading piece of all time. Just because it's stopping the pawns and also putting pressure onto his king. Just imagine if rook b2 gets played next, he's totally packed. Like, just almost no moves for white. It's a bit of a tricky position in a way that, well, you have to watch out for counterplay. That's the only thing to do, and then the game wins itself. But, yeah, I think here we have simple move, just bringing last piece into the game. Like, trading yourself may be a mistake, thinking you play rook c8 after, just because c5 and, you know, the pawns are starting to run. Still, I feel like rook b5 there could be enough to win, but you never want to risk it to give him any counterplay. So I'm gonna go rook c8. Maybe for him, he should try queen g5. But already I have like simple move. Let's say king f7 defending. Or maybe rook b6. I could even consider queen g5, play some kind of counterattack like e3. Sacrificing a pawn just to get this rook b2 idea and speed up the initiative in a way. Spending a little bit of time. If he goes for the queen trade, I think it's gonna be an easy win for us because we just need to kind of, let's say, bring the king closer to the center, and then we have a3 rook b2 idea. That should be, you know, all she wrote there. But yeah, let's see what he's gonna come up with. Yeah, he goes for the trade, but yeah, I didn't think he should be able to survive here. So he plays rook c2, very important move because I was threatening to infiltrate. And now if I go a3, he may play knight b3. And yeah, I have to retreat, and then the pawns start to roll. So I cannot push a3. I also cannot infiltrate. I have a move like rook c8, creating a hidden threat of rook d5. On rook c8, he's forced to go like rook b2. Now the question is, how is this rook endgame? After takes, rook takes, and rook coming to d4. I have a feeling that's a winning rook endgame. And also I have a feeling that we kind of want to go for it. Okay, I'm just going to try to not sacrifice. I feel like sacrificing is a bit concrete. I'm just going to keep it very simple and show you how to actually win it. And okay, he was not supposed to do this because it gives me rook b3. I'm going to show you what my plan was after the game. It was pretty easy, I think, to convert from that point. And, well, on rook a2, now already this is way simpler than before. Just because our king is so much more active. Yes, we have f4 as well. Maybe no need to sacrifice anything. Just pick up the pawn for free. But usually you want to have these options of sacrificing back the exchange on your radar. Because some people are just way to in love with their extra pieces instead of like making the conversion. And a lot of times the conversion is easier. Like for instance, now I almost have no move, but I can just do rook b4, and then I'm gonna like pick up the pawn on d5, and we literally have 3 extra pawns in the rook endgame, so should definitely be quite easy. Gonna take, and I think important concept to try to cut away his king. So ideally we try to bring ours. King is going to b3. Gonna take back. And then I'll try to restrict his king with my rook. Maybe it's, even unnecessary at this point on how winning the position is. But yeah, it's a nice little concept to be aware of in the king and rook end games. Like now we can push. King d1, we have nice move that you can try to find, which is rook d4. Just making sure we trade rooks and he has no way to stop the pawn. It's like a2, he could still sacrifice. Yes, that's completely winning here, but sometimes it's the move that you want to avoid. So finding these kind of like rook trades is a very important trick to keep in mind in these endgames, and I think he should take, but it doesn't really matter. So he just resigns, so I mean, he got a little bit nervous to the point where almost sacked back the exchange for no reason, but the way the game kind of ultimately went, I think it was okay. So the key takeaways from the opening are to make sure that, whenever you're dealing with the exchange, the main rule to remember against h3 is that if they either have knight on c3 or bishop on b5, we're always taking. Here we see none of that, so we retreat. And afterwards, there is this very important idea that, we really like to trade the enemy bishops. So bishop d6 is quite good, as well as playing bishop to g6 in this position, eliminating their most dangerous piece. Then the rest, you play queen to c7 so that we can get rid of the knight immediately, and black is having a very safe position. So with that being said, I think we can move on to the following game. Alright everybody, getting another black game facing a 1300 rated opponent. Gonna be sticking with our little opening, and okay. We do get the main position after d4. Pawns in the center. Gonna be going for the normal Caro move, and finally, we are dealing with the classical variation. Now, in this position, if you really wanna mess around with the sidelines, a6 can be quite interesting and juicy. I even showed it in a video before on the channel. But for now, until we reach like 1600, I really recommend you stick with the simplest de4, trying to play the Tartakower. Important to take, not to make mistake, knight f6, allow e5, and then the knight has no good square, so we destroy white's center. And then, after the recapture, instead of playing the somewhat more natural bishop move, targeting the knight, which is the most popular move in the position, I recommend you develop the knight. Just because the other variations are kind of long and dull, to be honest. Kind of hard to play for a win. And after they take, which is most common, important to take back with the e-pawn. Like maybe eventually we can mess around with the much more dangerous g takes. You guys can let me know in the comments if you want to see this on the channel. But for now, my universal approach, take with the e-pawn, get like a nice safe structure, castle kingside, and black usually gets a pretty easy game. Normally, instead of taking, they have options like retreating the knight somewhere. But yeah, for instance, let's say knight back, you can easily develop, and black has a good game. After knight f3, now typical beginner inaccuracy, developing the bishop. I know you guys are in love with getting the pin, but you should also become a little bit more comfortable to play without that. So for instance, if opponent plays h3, it's not like it's totally killing your game plan. And usually that pawn is a target. I will show you after the game what I mean. Goes bishop d3, we're gonna castle. And about the structure, the game is pretty easy. Bishop always goes to d6, we castle, then we get the pin, always play bishop g4 if possible. Knight goes to d7, rook goes into the open file, and then knight goes to f8. And when they're playing the move h3, we have a very nice simple rule to use. Whenever you are having the double pawns, we answer h3 with bishop h5, like always. You only take if he's forced to take back with a g-pawn. But generally, always slide the bishop back to keep this pressure. No need to be afraid of g4, because that is only weakening the enemy king. They are overextending, and we can drop back the bishop. Next up, we can play rook e8 is quite nice to occupy the open file. I expect him to play c3, bishop e3. These are usually the common moves. I wouldn't be shocked if he slides back the bishop. He could also do rook e1, many moves to choose from. And yeah, I mean, kind of against anything, we're gonna do rook e8, knight e7. And then it's important that you are familiar with this knight f8 idea. And the knight is pretty nicely placed. Okay, he goes c4. I'm gonna start with rook e8, very important fundamental move. Like, you're genuinely controlling 7 squares with only one move. That is pretty OP. That is pretty strong. Goes bishop to d2. Now knight always goes to d7 in this structure. Like, no need to do something complicated like c5. Some people play c5, knight c6, trying to get their knight out. But okay, it is very rare that you play c6, c5, to be honest. It's very rare that that's a good move. The only position when we do that is against the advance. That's when we do c5. So when they have pawn on e5, it makes sense. Other than that, try to stay away from it generally. And then bishop d2, just gonna continue with what I already mentioned. The knight goes on to f8. And speaking a little bit about the pawn structure, you need to understand that, well, pretty much all the endgames are gonna be worse for us. Okay, like, we have the double pawns, and the price that we are paying is that, well, white has this 4 against 3 majority on the queen side. So if they trade all the pieces, white is borderline winning. Now after g4, they kind of make our task even easier, because I was about to say that, well, we need to compensate by attacking the enemy king. And we usually do so by playing knight f8, and then we set up the sniper by playing bishop z7, queen d6, threatening bishop takes on f3, and then checkmate on h2 with a queen. And after g4, these ideas become even more stronger, because this diagonal gets even weaker. And perhaps we even manage to get the pawn cube, which is like a very nice little pawn structure, very cute. Our king is ultra safe, and we can even make some use of these pawns. We're gonna get started though with the simple knight f8. Always rook e8, knight f8 in the Tartakower. These moves go very well together. Not only making room for the battery, preparing bishop c7, but also the knight could later on be maneuvered to f4, like via e6, or by playing g5, and then the knight stays like that. And okay, opponent plays rook e1. Now, I have the option to ignore, play bishop c7. I could do knight e6, kind of denying the trade. On knight e6, I need to at least consider what happens in case of d5 attacking my knight. Because I normally don't want to allow him to push or get any like interesting moves in the center. To be honest, just to kind of keep a relatively smooth structure, I am considering takes and bishop c7, but I feel like giving up the open file is a pretty important concession. So I'm just gonna do queen d7. It's a bit of an ugly move, considering that our goal is kind of like finally to play this, but we want to be able to take back with the rook. And then I'm gonna play bishop c7 next move. Honestly, because he plays bishop c3, sort of leaving the f4 square completely undefended, I feel like knight e6 could be perfect way to exploit that. Because if he goes, let's say now, for the somewhat interesting looking d5 by pushing, then hello, knight is gonna be living on that square completely rent-free for the rest of the game. Which really goes to show why pushing this g4 move early, especially with the king on g1, is like a terrible weakening. Because imagine, if he could take the pawn back one move, play pawn to g3, his position is actually pretty good. But that's not a thing, okay? I'm gonna tell you a grandmaster secret. The pawns do not move backwards. So that is really gonna get to hurt our opponent here, I believe. To be honest, I think here he needs to sort of accept his mistake and retreat with the bishop. Go back to d2, because if bishop d2, knight f4, bishop takes, it's actually not very easy to break through in white's camp. So for that reason alone, I wouldn't play knight f4 on bishop d2. I would do bishop c7, play queen d6, and then, yeah, okay, he finds it. Very good move by him. Now this creates a threat, expecting him to do bishop e3 to defend. And then I kind of want to go queen d6 regardless. The main point being that, well, what do you want to play on this diagonal? He goes rook d1, really making me calculate. Like, we have to at least consider knight takes on d4, which honestly, I think is working. Like, knight takes, queen takes. He doesn't really seem to have such a useful discovery. So, that would be a winning move. Can we just play queen d6 and try to play more of a positional game? I feel like that would perhaps be a little bit more instructive for the sake of the video. I don't want to rely on like a move, let's say like a one move blunder like this. I think I'm going to do still queen d6. Or actually, I'm going to bring the rook. I'm just going to bring the rook because I want to get you into the habit of placing your rooks into the center of the board. And now he defends, which he was kind of supposed to do initially, like anyways. So now we're getting a pretty balanced and interesting position. Like, he may be ready to advance with d5, so kind of need to be careful. One move that could potentially be annoying for my opponent is bishop a5, tickling the rook. Maybe he has to play like rook f1. Also, just because d5 feels a little bit annoying, I could just, yeah, play knight f4. Which honestly, as I already mentioned, this is not gonna be easy to break through. But still, black has kind of like a lasting initiative, just because we can, let's say, target these pawns by playing f5. And, okay, white starts by taking. Rook e1 is not a good move now. Just initiating the trades, because this time I'm actually gonna be, yeah, I'm not gonna be that friendly and will collect the free pawn. So he plays d5 instead. Now this may look quite scary, but in fact, it's not really threatening much. So I could still consider f5, which I think we play right away. Because after dc, I can take with the queen, targeting the knight, and d6, I don't really feel like it's a move. Like, even if, let's say, maybe, yes, I cannot take the pawn, I'm like already ready to take. And after he grabs, it's important, I think, to stay away from the endgame, because we're really playing for his king, so the only way to kind of exploit the weakness of his king is by keeping queens on the board. And yeah, still kind of happy with dc. I can take it back. And after d6, I think the key move is perhaps to go for the rook lift. Additionally, because he has completely abandoned the e-file, I can consider moves like rook e4. But now I have simple recapture. Notice that I'm attacked, so I gotta respond to that threat. And yeah, now when the position, let's say, blast opens like this, I think it really goes to show, yeah, how strong black's attack really is. I think if he plays the, let's say, normal looking knight d4, he may easily get mated. So instead, he finds queen d3, which I guess is a bit of a better move. Still shouldn't be saving. There is rook e4, simple move, but I think we can go for the check. And then we can start targeting the h3 pawn, queen h5. Kind of hard for him to move the knight. Like knight d4, for instance, I can try to pin him. I can maybe consider bishop e3. Oh, that's such a nice move. I mean, I haven't really completely nailed the move by move stuff, but I'm using a little tactic with the interference right there. Perhaps I even had the rook e3 that was better. Actually, we'll have to check that in the analysis tab. So now he panics and blunders. Pause the video to find why. Because the rook remains undefended. But I think his position was already lost. So we'll have to check it briefly after the game. I think, yeah, we have it even a flashier win. And here, very simple. Um, I could even play this move, but I'm just gonna take just because he has literally no threats. Normally, I would advise you to exchange the queens whenever you have opportunity like that, but here you can even keep because we get to play for checkmate. So, did we miss even a more brilliant move? Oh, no, dude. Seriously? Did you miss anything? I can't believe it. Tell me about it. At the end of the day, I think that's why you probably quit professional chess. Honestly, the guy from the comments is probably right. It genuinely hurts me what you play when you have the opportunity to play a move such as Rook e3 and you don't. Sacrificing the rook. Hitting this and that. If they take with a pawn, honestly, they cannot really do much. But probably resign at this point because after queen takes on h3, only move king g1. Then his bishop takes on e3. King is trapped in a box. Pandora box even. And white has to give up the queen. Black is completely winning. I don't know how you guys suffer this guy play, missing such nice tactics. I mean, his analogies are kind of weird, but he is a bit funny at times. Anyways, I think with that, we can move on to the following game. Alright, everybody, managed to get another game with the black pieces. Gonna be going for the Caro-Kann, and okay, opponent goes knight c3. Is it gonna be exchange? Because usually that is what they play. Like normally, for somebody that starts knight c3, it makes sense to play the two knights. Because after ed5, he's already getting an inferior version just because the knight is not well placed on c3 in this structure. Ideally, okay, in like a normal world, the way white usually plays this is by going d4, d5, and then they want to get a transposition to the London system with bishop d3, pawn to c3, bishop f4. So the pawn is the one that goes to c3, not the knight in the exchange. Just because, well, a lot of the times this pawn on d4 is going to be a bit vulnerable, you know, since it cannot be protected by another pawn. So usually your development, whenever you are dealing with the exchange, you can figure out it's the exchange variation whenever they make this move. So development pretty easy. Knights onto the natural squares. Ideally, bishop goes to g4. If not possible, like f5 is fine as well. And we go e6. And usually I recommend you always play bishop to e7 as you get started. Gonna play e6, very easy development so far, preparing castle, and we are gonna face h3 sooner or later. I'm also expecting bishop g5 from them. And whenever you are dealing with the exchange variation, the rule goes the same. I mean, the rule doesn't go the same, but the rule that I made goes the following way. So if they either have knight on c3 or bishop on b5, we're gonna be answering h3 by taking against the exchange variation. So always, if you look for that, you can take. If you see none of that, you can slide the bishop back. So it takes with the bishop, and usually in these type of positions, the computer prefers bishop to d6. But just because they will kind of universally play bishop g5 and the pin gets very annoying, I recommend you do the simpler move and then just get castled. They're probably going bishop g5 anyways. Okay, this guy goes to f4. I'm gonna get castled, and you wanna get sort of yeah, into this good habit of making sure you're placing your rook onto the open file, because a lot of the black players usually overlook this rook c8 idea because they don't quite see immediately what's the purpose of this move, but it's just gonna be very helpful to have. I mean, imagine with a move, you're kind of in the future uh, targeting like, that is easily 5 squares, even 6 squares could be. That is pretty overpowered. So, okay, opponent goes rook e1. And we have one of, let's say, the most common positions that you can reach for this structure. And what beginners usually don't understand is that in order to dominate this structure, you need to start pushing these pawns. So what people would usually do here, they start either attacking the queen or they make random piece moves. That's not gonna take you very far. So first you wanna do a6, preparing the b5 push. And then we can decide. Alright, like if you're wondering, isn't queen b6 a double attack? Maybe, reasonable move. But usually I think it's just risky to rely on this concrete idea. So I'd much rather, get a pawn push. Bishop to e5, you can already take the bishop when they allow it. But I'm gonna play b5, just ignore it for now. And what you really need to understand about this variation, like as long as your king is safe, you just have risk-free pressure on the queen side thanks to the open file. So now, with his last move, he's essentially saying that b4 is, not gonna be that annoying because he can just take. Therefore, common maneuver that you wanna remember whenever you're whenever you're delivering the minority attack, you're gonna play knight a5, getting it all the way to c4. Because when the knight lands, then these pawns are gonna be very weak on the queen side. Just imagine you play knight c4, he cannot push b3, because that allows bishop takes on a3. So yeah, I think we can just play it. Additionally, if let's say you have like already played queen d7, queen c6 could have been a good move, putting even more pressure on the c file. But yeah, obviously that's not there. And we can just take. And I bet he's gonna play rook a1, blundering. What do you guys think? Try to pause the video and find why this is a blunder. Oh, no, he just resigns. Dude, you're not supposed to resign this position. Come on. Come on. What do we have here? I think this is some clear proof that this guy has been paying his opponents all the time for these kind of staged games, farming YouTube content. No, actually, that's a joke. I know him pretty well, and I can tell you for sure that he's way too cheap to pay anybody. So, the key learning theme from this game is to remember to get into this good habit of placing your rook onto the open file. I mean, just imagine if your opponent tries to like reroute the knight with a move like this. Now you can instantly win, thanks to the double attack. Additionally, make sure to really remember that before rushing with any pawn push here, make sure to get in this very juicy knight maneuver. Get a knight over to c4, and this is gonna be hanging onto white's position like a sword on top of his head. So I think that has been pretty much it for the video. London course on a sale for less than 24 hours. Get yours and get the heck out of here.